Greetings. First of all, I would like to thank you for yours to participate in this special 1 hour seminar that to cover on the vulnerability assessment with Nessus Pro version 10 product overview. This is actually the result of on and off have a lot of existing customers been asking for a round of technologies updates on the version 10, when it is launched in the November 2021 to be doing in the more organized manner, so that we at least to arranging in this way of the seminar to packaging all the information that whether it's an existing and new customer, you will be interested to know about what is this purpose is about. Let's starting on. Originally, I planned to put you all into the e-learning system, but afterwards, seeing that it's just a 1 hour length of the content, right? So what I will do is later on that I will be putting into the PDF for you, and then together with the certificate of attendance still. How could we know who is being attended or not? Actually, they have the login activity log. From there, you will know who is participate on the section, and then to matching with the previous legislations. Then we will know. Let's continue because today they have a few topics. Some I will spend some time to talk more in detail, because some of the text that eventually it will send to you in the PDF. So I will not be reading what you see here. I just using it as an indication to let me know what I should cover for you in return. Okay, first of all, the objective for these sections is because it covers for both new and the existing customers. What is Nessus Pro, what it can do, what's new about the latest versions. When you talk all those things, of course, we'll talk about some features, some benefit, requirement, readiness, and some more technical context item. So we will be followed in the logic order, and we move on. So then we will end in the Q&A if we have time for it. Right? If then we don't have, then with the end of it, you just write the email over. Then we'll try to address it for you. So everything we talk about is on the version 10. No further delay. Let's jump direct to the point to what is this particular section is about. In the quick to let every new and old one to just a quick recap. Nessus Professional, we talk about it is a vulnerability scanner. In particular for this version of the Nessus Pro, is most likely will be used by the security consultant or even the IT department, specific officer there to perform a generic vulnerability assessment from infrastructure to application, to discover for the cyber exposures, right? To know about all the vulnerability. Then that way that the company is to be performed for the security configuration management, SCM, to achieve for the regularly compliant. Let's say that you in the ISO 20001, then you cannot run away to make use of the technical vulnerability management, because it's one of the substandard. You need to have demonstrated that you have performed like the threat modeling, technical vulnerability management, and then for the rest of the processes we were touching on the vulnerability management to be a way of a demonstrated being achieved, and then for the auditor to perform their respective certifications. In a very quick one, they have a two broad idea I will want to bring in first, so that later on all the slide and whatever concept you will introduce, it will be much more in a clear and easier to absorb manner. When the time we talk about vulnerability, exploit, and threat, this is actually 3 different concepts, but it interrelated. From the tool like vulnerability assessment tool, we talk about like the Nessus Pro or other similar tool in the market. Their key focus area is on the vulnerability. They will be trying to perform the information gathering, some configuration baseline checking or whatever, then also to getting for the CVSS, the signature checking, right? Then to compile to you in a list of the potential vulnerability according to the matching criteria that they match to present to you, even inclusive of some of the penetration testing, those scanned being subscribed for is potentially exploitable thing. They will highlight, but they will never really exploit the particular vulnerability. Then you're breaching into the system or hack. This is why you see that in the diagram that we put in here. Actually, is a three different things people looking for. For perform for the vulnerability assessment is to address for technical vulnerability management, where is also is one of the very key standard control mean for all the viral standard that you try to help your company to achieve. Exploit is only meta penetration testing, depend on the industry. Some maybe need to be have a third party to perform it in like any kind of system change, or maybe a year, or even some I come across is 18 months period. So, and then we talk about the threat. Threat is something real threat that to the company, where for most of the company I come across, usually for those with a very good experience in the governance, risk management, and therefore compliance background, right? They will have more sound working knowledge on threat modeling, because by right, the threat modeling should be done before technical vulnerability management, because this gives you to know which is the area matter most you should be dealing with, like what kind of access, what kind of likely attack path, all those thinking, so that you will not need to deal with the more to be decision like the two vulnerability, which one I should fixing first, because those answers actually supposed to be addressed in the threat modeling already. Well, so like in a form like the risk impact and severity metrics, right? That is a form of a way to help the company to making all those decisions in place. This is why I want to highlight this one first, because we talk about Nessus. It is vulnerability assessment tool built with the technical vulnerability management. Of course, we talk about the technical vulnerability management because this one too not clear. I put in one more clear version here. Okay, when the time we talk in very generic, so that because it's not a full course on the vulnerability management, but it would to be addressed it to see how it's linked to each other. So when talk vulnerability management or you talk technical vulnerability management, is basically the whole process involved the four very important key process where it's been highlighted in this blue bar here. First, you got to identify the vulnerability, then you evaluate, treating the vulnerability, and then the reporting. Let's start in the quick one first. Identify the vulnerability, we're focusing on the enterprise IT access. Because we talk about the IT technical vulnerability assessment. So we come on this domain. In just here have a few examples on like endpoint. Endpoint will be like your laptop. Companies start to do the mobile mobility, so that they start have a template, smartphone. Especially now, some people working at home, company have those access that maybe some is the employee access, but it be used to access to company data and so on. We typically call those things as endpoint. And then the server, it may be physical, and then the virtual usually is the part of the machine. I call it whether putting into your private cloud, public cloud, loading into the containers for some services, right? Because of the moving toward the micro architecture and services. Then, of course, one big chunk of the important item is some enterprise application that the company is depend on to running their business. Those is definitely is important access, because it's typically here I have not mentioned the data, actually all the infrastructure like network equipment, routers, switches, firewall, IPS, right? They have some configuration. This part is in particular configuration, right? That needs configure or the default password, all firmware, all those things. Company is supposed to be based on the access. then to identify, perform the vulnerability assessment to understanding for what kind of the potential vulnerability being listed for you right at that point of time during scan. Then of course from the list of the vulnerability, then we got to evaluate the vulnerability. Definitely, technically, we are referring to the common vulnerability scoring system, the CVSS. Since he is the industry cater for the vulnerability, right? Every other vendor or whatever product, all will definitely will leveraging it to be performed for the CVSS. And then between there, they were giving three things that for your evaluation is on the risk that you're talking about and what kind of the score, and then the severity of it. That for you as a part of an evaluation of this particular vulnerability. And then another big part of it is definitely the GRC, because like depend on the, like let's say you in banking have their banking guideline or those thinking, right? And then for the different industry, we will have the different standard is the mandate to be compliant. Let's say you in the healthcare, they have the HIPAA. It will say like the US multinational listed company, right? You have a SOX to be compliant. And then for banking, who hosts the payment processor, right? You have PCI, DSS, etc., etc. Even for those, let's say like you perform for the ISO 20001 for ISMS, right? You also have certain control, and then you got to demonstrate the guideline and what is being implemented inside. So those things will be some of the evaluating things that you must be in consider. Once that you have the filter checklist already, then you will be need to treating on the respective vulnerability. Depend. Some you definitely they were giving you the limitation like you should be closing what port, or you should upgrade to the newer versions, or you got to patch it, or you got to do the system hardening to closing certain port, all those thinking, right? You got to do those elimination. Mitigation is in the form, let's say that there is no way to be fixing in the bug, in the code, or in the system. You cannot upgrade, you cannot do whatever. Then the mitigation thing usually people will look into is, let's say, like the firewall to block certain IP, let's say from outside external IP segment, right? Can be accessed to the particular say port, or only open for certain subsegment of the port as a way of the mitigation the risk, right? So, or maybe it changing to or adding more different layer of defense, etc. and etc. Besides elimination mitigation, then another true in line is that the vulnerability treatment maybe sometimes you got to accept it is the accepted vulnerability. Typical example will be, let's say, some company have hosted some very legacy application. Those things it will only running in a much older Windows version, because of the particular source code or maybe the median of investment have been made on that. And then it's still functioning, running well, etc., and so on into perspective on the business operation. You accept those risks on whatever. You try to do everything, but at the same time you mark as the acceptance, right? And then, of course, the final process is in the form of reporting of the vulnerability. Use case here have a lot. You can see here that, but I put few years. For the use case, definitely the report we are using to referring to how to fixing the respective vulnerability. And then for monitoring vulnerability management point of view, right? We may need to want to monitoring the vulnerability trend over time. For instance, we may have want to know, let's say that in the server A, right, they have, let's say 10 vulnerability. How about ongoing along the years, right? Is that whether that have any improvement, the risk reduction progress along the way? Because it's sometimes for you to reporting to some compliant, right? You might achieve certain kind of the improvement during a period of time. You want to be demonstrate those things. Then where the reporting is become helpful. So some people will be in the bigger contents. We will be like have any vulnerability, will trigger some support ticket into the in-house build software developer team, or some will be integrated with some sort of like the patch management system to be open for the respective cases that may need to look into. I think most of the very heavyweight reason people were using vulnerability assessment tool, in particular for commercial one, is because for the legally compliant requirement, they want to produce the audit ready report, and then it will be easier to be communicate among with all the respective stakeholders that from different places. Way that in the standard format that easier to be communicated. So this is a typical thing people will do on using this kind of tool for. So I hope this will quickly give us some pre-concept, then we can move in here much more easier. What is a Nessus? Besides, he can perform for the vulnerability scanning of the infrastructures for the scanning purpose, and then for remediation prioritization. You actually, a lot of people know also is that the Nessus also can perform for web application, cloud environment, and the mobile device scanning. Yes, the answer is yes, but the feature set is quite a very minimum up to a very basic. For certain industry and some customer may not be want to use those features. Basically, this is not considered as a very core use case, but Nessus Pro can do those things. I give you an example. For instance, right, say like the Nessus can do for the configuration audit for the router and switches, maybe a page or half page. But using those dedicated configuration audit tool, you will easily to produce 300 to 500 pages of a very detailed configuration and why and so on. This is why that you ask me, if you in this industry long enough, you will know actually what is the best use case for using Nessus Pro. I wouldn't say it is no good. You must know what you aim for, and the purpose in particular we are talking about the objective and use case for Nessus. You must know also the Nessus vulnerability scanner also can provide some malware detection and audit for control system. Depend on how you know how to using all those the plugin check. I refer to the Nessus, right? Then you will know what actually you can achieve more from using the tool. The Nessus scanning engine, right, using the plugin. Now, plugin is a term we use. Basically, the layman term we use is the check, security check or audit check or compliance check. It is some rule to check for certain things, the plugin, right? All come with a number to let it for virus associated vulnerability. For instance, let's say like Linux machine, right, virtual OS, you will not instance to perform for certain check on the Windows because you will only interest to perform for more relevant check and so on. You also need to know what it cannot do. It is not include penetration testing capability, because due to the reason for the Nessus is considered quite a market recognized standard. Usually all those pen testing tools definitely will support for the importing the scan result. I mean the pen testing tool, then you can continue to perform for automatically highlight for all those vulnerability to be performed for the vulnerability verification, and then to try to explore based on all those pen testing tools to cut short the time on that. That is definitely into the exploitation areas. Of course, as if you have been done the business with ESP before, you know we actually do end-to-end. Nessus is one of the two we carry for the full process, whether you are to intend to later on doing for application security testing and then to pen testing, or even the modern, a lot of people is migrating to the DSecOps. We have all those things in place. Before we continue further to, because you talk about what is the Nessus Pro is a bit of very time and lengthy. So we will be using technical diagram below to explain for you interrelationship among all. So regardless of whether you are new or the existing customers, so you will found and related to know where it come from, where the direction go, and whether what are the feature, what should you looking for, etc., etc. Let's start from here first. Nessus, I call it Nessus Family. If you've been used a tool for a long time, Very originally, Nessus is open source. It's only after that eventually they become closed source, then the company called Tenable Network Security is formed. Then further, then they are listed become a Tenable. However, the Nessus is being proven in the market even before they commercialize it. So that at that time they always being named as the professional feed because we were charging the commercial customer in the form of as a subscription, right? To subscribe to all the active check-in, the plugin library, and the related like perform the compliance check and other templates and the other service that you can do with the tool. Then eventually people is usually calling Nessus Professional or Nessus Pro in short. If you long enough, you notice here has some word you may not be seen before also. In one period of time, we have something called Nessus Enterprise. That is targeted for the enterprise. Then eventually it becomes Nessus Managers. What different is this that it will be have the agent. You can perform or deploy the agent into respective servers. Instead of you perform a network scanning for all the machines, you are scheduled on a specific day and time. Respective agent schedule the assessment and send the result to you instead. That thing eventually then is moving into, you can see here, I explained a bit, right? At that time, during the time, it actually is called Nessus Cloud version. Originally, they is aimed for like AWS at that time. Eventually, the product line is end of life. Then it renamed as a Tenable IO. Before Tenable IO time, actually that for the enterprise customer is actually the target version is called Security Center. Now they call SC. Is basically is the Nessus, but with the practicing of the licensing by IP with dashboard. Then for the full element that I spent there, they actually have a two more different products to work up together. One is a passive vulnerability scanner, PVS, but eventually they call network monitor. This is something, if you know about like the IPS kind of product, they will be basically is put into the network to like the sensor to be sniffing for the traffic, for vulnerability. And then the log correlation engine basically is quite similar like other log management. But the log here, because they all put in here together, into the one, exactly like what the word is for the SOC use case by Security Center. Eventually, they have another version called the continuous view, where with these three things here, then with the roaming, I talk later on, then to form it. Later on, actually, they start to more focusing as the world is migrate to cloud first, because they already have on-prem, so they're focusing on a cloud version. This is for the cloud. Then they have a Tenable IO. It is basically for the vulnerability management. It's just that they are licensing by IP. Because some customers don't like to be so restricted by that, right? This is why where this family of Nessus is continued to be there. It's unlimited IP one. But for the people migrate to Tenable IO is more than liking like the dashboard. Can you perform the access management because they are licensing you by IP, so they have a database. You can keep track, like train over time. If you say, Vincent, can I do it with Nessus? You can, but you got to manually do. If not, then you got to be using like some third party the reporter pack. That's to support Nessus, right? Then you can do for the comparison for two different scans in a different time, right? What is the differences? Those you need some mini add-on, it can be done. But this one is purely licensing by IP with the dashboard, all those things. During the period of time, they have a company called ForCheck. It's doing for container security because there is for the DSecOps. So they acquire this company, then they become their container security, another add-on plug into this umbrella that you can license separately. Recently, then they bought another company, Acunix. Then they start to call it Tenable CS, stand for Cloud Security. Then they end this Cloud Security and then fully concentrate on this. The decision is just make some way early of the month, so that your end of sales already for the container right? So they encourage all the customer on this migrating over here. So this is a new area they're focusing on with this technology, and all technology they're getting from here to become this one. Web application scanning is it's been quite some time already. They try to build another engine for that. Customer who have a very specific web application that is interested to be licensing by the per URL basis. Normally is more on the risk vulnerability management. It is the reporting, you can call it as a reporting enhancement pack for the Tenable IO. If we have vulnerability management to provide you few more different mode of view on like risk calculating and scoring, benchmark, all those thinking, the previous technical vulnerability report do not have. This normally also can plug in into the security center family as a plug-in add-on. Another use case for PCI ASP for the industry that need to perform for the quarterly submission of the report to get endorsed one, right? You in this Tenable IO, you can on top to subscribe for the PCI ASP. They were based on whatever you scan result, then the quarterly will have a human on their side to be helped to endorse that report for you, where you can using for the PCI DSS purpose. Along the way, they have some other thing. Okay, they have a scanner. Originally, they bought a company called Energy that is doing for the IC and SCADA system, the limit industry security. Then later on, they are on renamed as the Tenable OT Operation Technologies. Besides that, they have bought in a company who do the AD, the Active Directory Security, and then name it as a Tenable AD. Then they will be also create another form of a packaging, the Wonder Bundle, then with the Tenable AD, with the IO, with the vulnerability management, with the web application scanning, and then with the roaming, right? It's a one all-in-one, I will call it value package, right? For some customer who willing to put in everything in here. So I hope to be spend some time to quickly cover this where we are until now. You can see from the past what family related relationship among those technology, and where is their current mainstream focusing, and then how they are integrated together to give you some very quick understanding for all those old and new, and then you know what they are for. Let's continue. But of course, we just cover what Nessus is. Okay, so in what it can do, usually I would say so, I would say 100% close to it. Most of people, when the time to invest in this is mainly to perform for two things here. One is to perform for the security configuration management SCM. It is a technical term used across a lot of places, and then to achieve for the regulatory compliance. It is one of the way to demonstrate that company have achieved it. So like in the very high level early they have performed, here it just give you more quick understanding what they can do. First you perform for define the scan parameter, right? Then you perform a scan, then launch the scan, then analyzing the scan result. This is the very core of what not just for the Nessus Pro, I will say all the vulnerability scanner, host-based vulnerability scanner will follow a very similar way, regardless of what term they use the name it. And then for the like from the Nessus, how the vulnerability analysis come in the picture is that because first the process it will retrieve the scan setting and create a configuration for each of the scan profile. Then you perform for the host with cover, let's say like operating system. Then you perform for the port scan, like what port is being open to matching with the security configuration, benchmark, baseline. And then also to be detect for certain services like IIS, Apache, what version is running. Again, it will cross-checking again the current, any particular version being highlighted into the CVSS and so on. And of course, and detect for the version. Then they will from there they compile for the vulnerability analyst report from you. This is in a really quick what it can do, because from the vulnerability assessment, typically customer that some say they can done manually. You can manually, it's not many, but when the time you have a lot of machine and then the infra you got to deal with, and then you have other tasks in hand, right? Definitely that through like the vulnerability scanner like Nessus Pro, it will make your job more handy because you have a lot of things. Another two important features and people use for it to perform a scheduled scan at the fixed time and a fixed day and a fixed intervals, and then to automate the process. As long as you know what the thing you want to check, and then what is the policy and for what compliant, right? You can do, because that it will help you to be managing by the exception, and then you will always can retrieve for the report for the respective use case, all those thinking. Of course, it will be like we say, they are not just for perform for the generic vulnerability assessment. Because of the generic, you also can do quite a lot of things. Where that is for the Nessus Pro customer, you can access to the preview policy and template. They have a lot of features. Of course, not all is really the best in that class, but it provides those features there. Just like I just mentioned, like it also can perform web application scanning. It can also perform for the network router switches configuration audit, or you can use it besides vulnerability assessment. I think another key use case most of people do is for doing the compliance check. I give you an example. Using in a reverse way, they say that to checking to have a respective machine, whether they have using a specific version of antivirus software your company using like version 1.5, right? You need to meet at least 1.5. If below that, it's not compliant. You can perform also like for the password length checking, like how many password length been using to detect it, right? To perform for the quick compliant and not checking, right? So we usually use the word compliant check to making the thing, right? Like just here, just a snapshot, we can see perform for cloud scanning, and then for perform basic network scanning, credential patch audit, and then for the malware scan, and then for mobile device scanning. Mobile device scan is not the mobile device management MDM or UEM, the Unified Endpoint Management or that kind of thing. You must understanding this is for the checking tool, not that kind of management tool. So configuration audit, and then for the scrap and over auditing, right? Scrap, right? So you can base on this to modify it and then to perform for the checking, and then for some the risk go on. Customized reporting is come in particular, now in version 10. By the way, we don't have version 9 in the market. It's on version 8, then move to version 10. Version 9, the word 9 is being jumped, so that actually since version 8 onward, right, it's become a very colorful reporting since that time. You can create various kind of report in the HTML, CSV, and Nessus XML. For those that still feel that is not enough, Vincent, I want to be using like the Microsoft Word, Excel, all those thinking, right? Yeah, actually for the Nessus Pro customer, you can subscribe for something I call it the reporter pack. Just some friction of the fee. You can actually doing what I just mentioned. Microsoft Word is very highly popular. Also can perform some sort of trim features. So later on I will explain to you what I mean trim features. The reporting the dashboard to quickly highlight for all those thinking that we needed, and then for the live like feature like the live result to auto perform offline vulnerability assessment. With every plugin update, so whether you have a vulnerability based on your scan history, so you can add on it. From where you can easily run a scan to validate the presentation, present of the vulnerability, that to prioritize on the issue to resolve and so on. Group view, you can group the view that similar issue and category of the vulnerability. You group together to present in one form. So to make it more easier to prioritize remediation process. Okay, reporter, this is what I want to say, right? Because sometimes time people ask for those things, but I don't want to spend on licensing by IP, right? So what you need to do is that from the Nessus Pro scenario, you just add in this reporter add-on. So they will create few features you can do, like create the Word. So create a Word report, create a Microsoft Word report directly from the Nessus scan, merge the result. Okay, this is a feature commonly asked also from technical hardcore. They don't know why they want to merge the result. Especially you want to merge the result on the same IP, different time period, or even the host name in the scenario like in the dynamic IP network, right? But it's the same machine. You want to merge the result. And then also tweaks from other of your custom mapping on a different scan. You know the vulnerability scanning from the Nessus Pro result, right? You want to merge two scans into one. Then you want to manually editing some scan result, like changing multiple of the vulnerability severity, or add-in or audit tree to each of the vulnerability. Translate output, some customer, they always need to be produce a report into their end customers or their own within their enterprise. Some people will need to consume a report in different languages. Instead of you by hand you're doing it, right? So you're using those translate feature, the output directly, the technical output to become a different languages just into the Word. Because the Word you can further poly and then compare result because this is the feature definitely in the licensing by IP because in the database you can do. But here with the reporter you can compare different period of time scan result. Let's say right for the same machine, then you can highlight for the differences, export into the Excel, then we can see which vulnerability are new, etc. So we all need to touching on or subscribe to licensing by IP edition and so on. And for the very hardcore people, command line support to create, and here is all referring to the reporting purpose. Then creating the report from whatever way you want in the command line and integrate into some custom scripting. So this is most of the thing people will want to know. And then for the v10, okay, how we start on v10 because I got to cover all those things first, right? To address some people new to this product. Okay, new features, right? They have a lot of new features, but there are few really worth to highlight. I mentioned first is a Raspberry Pi support. You must know this really tiny, like the hand palm size machine. It needs a lot of things. Dell is in the Pi version 4. Right, 4th generation is 64-bit. So that means this tiny thing, it can be, let's say we can install Nessus inside. It will open up a lot of scanning possibility. Let's say to throwing this thing into a factory or some remote site, or due to the reason that it's too costly to have the machine, right? Because hardware is cost also, right? So, but with this tiny and low cost tiny machine, you can use it because a lot of port also, right? So that you can use it to plug in into all those things, or you ship it into the different country of your subsidiary. Just inform someone to plug in into their network, turn it on, then you can perform your scanning and then get the result from it. This is one I was saying that with this so-called the Make Nessus Pro portable. So this is really a very portable. Compare with laptop, right? The beautiful to have a dedicated a tiny machine or whatever remote box, right? Is that you are filling up your laptop to doing those things because your laptop you may carry with you to doing other things, check email, write report, and so on, right? While you need something dedicated to help it to perform for what you want it to be performed on that particular network segment or site. So let me see. So it's a low-cost platform, basically. Of course, this is also people will be. You can customize it according to what the spec of the machine you need now, but it is quite a mature product nowadays. Another thing is definitely is the dark mode. Let me jump on the dark mode support. It will be particularly good for those people who need to be reading the screen for a very long period of time in the dark mode support. in particular like the SOC, Security Operations Center, 24/7 working hour in night time, right? You can see this particular screen here, the comparison in the dark mode and then in the daytime mode, right? How he will be affected your eyes to have this. Here is another good example to let you know. But I think the daytime, I think most of people will accept it from, I call the day mode, and then the night mode in a more light scenario, or maybe at night time, night mode will look more good for the eyes. Whether there is more productivity or not, it depends on people. I think some the programmer they prefer usually in a more darker screen, right? To make their eye also go to the screen. But for me, dark mode, it opens up some of the much more good way you can see, can imagine when maybe you can switch it on at specific day and time. But I think it's not something new. It's all the operating system is being supported. So it just make it more really modern touching on. Other additional thing which you be talking about, right? I don't say those kind like the customize, enhance, edit the reporting, improve the plugin compiler to run faster, more efficient. They have tuning the user interface from the classic to new one. Now you can still allow to switch, right? Allow me to jump so that to the like now on the version 10, right, is support for the Oracle Linux 8, Windows 11, Windows Server 2022, Ubuntu 18 for ARM as well as for the Mac 10. This is some of the new add-in the YOS supported. Some change and enhancement is that they have been implemented the implementation of the Nessus database to reduce the use of the displays during the plugin compilations, and then also back in packet capture in Nessus to doing for the debugging, right, for unexpected scan result more handy. And then for the update of the SSL cipher, and then remove of the unsecure and less secure ciphers, right? And the improvement on the dynamic plugin compiler. The list go on. So that what else that would to be mentioned on this section? Okay, should be on the upgrade. Actually, then you can upgrade to the data version of Nessus, right, from any previous supported version. If you upgrade car, you have a script for respective field of the version of it. It would you to review for the release note, at least know about which version that you script, then to know what kind of feature or bug fix that being applicable on there. Also, there is allow you to be make use of the checking to access to the GAD instead of the early access release, compared with the more stable signature that you've been passing based on the setting. Update your scanner, of course. You also can disable automatic update, especially some enterprise environment. They try to reduce the disruption based on that. One thing you need to take note is that seeing version 8.8 onward until now the version 10 or future, right? You from Windows scenarios, right? You must always install the Visual C++. They distribute for Visual Studio 2015 because it needed to be working. So the following, in particular mentioned here, you definitely need to be installed Windows 7 if you're still using it, 2008, right? Service Pack 2, right? R2 Service Pack 1. Okay, the system requirement. In case you are still don't aware what kind of the system requirement, right? You might understood, here we typically will install Nessus into a server class machine. Actually, normal PC will do. In particular, even install into the Linux OS compared with the Windows, because Windows has some restriction being controlled. But in general, to say so, for the minimum recommended hardware, right? Because you see here, we're talking about for 15,000 hosts per scan, In a normal enterprise scenario, you won't scanning per scan in that kind of 15,000. Maybe some will be in multiple segments, but you can based on here to reduce for the recommendation, but it's typically standard machine in the modern day like 8 gig machine. The usage displays over time because you accumulate, right? And then for the even put higher, then you need more RAM lah. But I think in general scenario, 8 gig of the, I don't know whether you're using Windows Server, right? I think that is usually typical enough if you are not using for other purpose at the same time. The keyword is concurrently you using machine for what? If not, actually you can share the machine without harm, right? Because you are not using all the time for scanning, right? So virtual machine it will be very popular nowadays. Everyone is using the machine to be running multiple virtual machines. Same as long as you meeting the requirement, you can configure to running as a virtual machine, whether to install into your own private cloud and so on. System now you can support the running Mac, Linux, and Windows. For the Windows, you need to have something to be installed. So the current version is version 10.01. So you can see that they have a lot of like Amazon Linux or whatever thing here. New support list is putting there. And then for the Windows, that is talking about the Mac version that is being supported. This will be the list of what it will be covered up to this version. Here I won't read all, I just pick into the latest one. The current one based on when we compile for this section, right, is on the February 8th, right? The build is 1.1. Is basically the one that we say about for you to access to the GA general availability version instead of stable one. For some people prefer quick, faster read, right, check than the before you release one. So and other thing that downgrade. Usually seldom have people will practicing downgrade but in case if you are really in that scenario, then you have to follow like what is mentioned here to making the particular version of it to be compatible before you really downgrade it into the lower versions. I believe that I cover for all the objective for this section is about what is Nessus, what it can do, what news about it, and then some I try my best to compact everything into this hour on the Nessus feature, benefit, requirement, really news, right? As well as a quick summary and a 2 quick process for the vulnerability, exploit, and trick to get you to have a bigger understanding how this governing for, not just for the Nessus, I will say so for all the vulnerability management practice right now in the market, as well as the vulnerability management in a very generic process. I say in high level, so you can get the idea for what it can do, what it is for, as well as the very quick also to be talked about the Nessus family and with the rest of the Tenable Product. Had no form of any history root on it. And then for the Security Center family and the current Tenable IO licensing by IP, what they're changing, and then for all those new acquisition and takeover company, where they are mapping back into this diagram. Because I know, because if I would put it into the technical diagram, it's a bit of the difficult for you to absorb a lot of information in a smaller matter of time. In the end, so that I hope you enjoy the section, so-called the handout, right? The handout in PDF. We will send it to you. So after, and then for this particular session, it's been recorded, so that we will be posted into the YouTube for those who want the playback, or in future, right, asking for the similar thing, you can review for this particular video that to be helping you on that. So it's our pleasure with you on this time, and have a good day for everyone. Bye.